All right, so today we are diving deep into the world of power, but not the kind of power you see in the headlines.
Yeah.
We are talking about the everyday power dynamics
Yeah.
that Robert Greene talks about so well in his work, especially his conversation with Jay Shetty.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about Greene is that he really doesn't see power the way most people do. He kind of throws out those traditional ideas of dominance and control,
Right.
and instead he wants us to look at power as this tool for self-mastery
Mm.
and a way to create change like right around you in your immediate surroundings.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
Greene's own fascination with power starts early on, right? He talks about feeling powerless growing up in his family, constantly observing his parents' behavior.
Yeah.
Almost like he was trying to crack the code of their actions to figure out how to navigate his own world.
It's remarkable how common that is.
Yeah.
Like, kids are incredibly perceptive when it comes to these power dynamics, particularly within their family, like you said. And Greene's career path is really interesting, too. You know, journalism, Hollywood screenwriting, even manual labor he talks about.
Right.
And that exposed him to power structures at all levels of society.
Yeah.
Which has got to give you a unique perspective, I think.
Absolutely. And he even compares working in Hollywood to this pressure cooker of power plays all hidden behind this facade of art and creativity.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, was that the inspiration behind his book, The 48 Laws of Power?
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, he wrote that book for the underdog,
Yeah.
the person who felt lost in those unspoken rules of power that some people just seem to get,
Yes. Yeah.
It's about leveling the playing field, empowering people through awareness.
I like that. So how does Greene actually redefine power? Because, we got to admit, if you ever felt powerless, the word itself can feel icky.
It can, and Greene gets that. He actually sees that aversion as a form of denial, like we're all pretending that we can just opt out of power dynamics altogether. But here's the thing, even feeling powerless is a relationship to power.
Mm.
So Greene's challenge to all of us listening is pinpoint those areas in your own life where you feel that sense of powerlessness. Is it a difficult coworker, maybe a strained family relationship?
And he's saying that we have more agency than we realize,
Yeah,
but we often give it away by dwelling on the things we can't control.
exactly. Greene would tell you to shift your focus. Instead of dwelling on what you can't control in those situations, focus on what you can control, your reactions, your strategies, even your ability to just influence the situation in small ways. That's where your power lies.
Okay, so we're starting to see power less as this big scary thing and more as a tool for navigating the complexities of our lives.
Yeah.
But there's still that lingering, negative connotation around power.
There is. And
Right.
Greene tackles that head on, especially what he sees as the hypocrisy from people who have benefited from power but then kind of preach against it.
Right.
He uses examples like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. to illustrate that even in social justice movements, understanding these power dynamics is crucial for actually making real change happen.
That's a really good point, because it's almost like saying, even if you have the best intentions in the world, it's not enough.
Right.
You actually need a strategic understanding of power to make those intentions effective.
Absolutely.
Which leads us to, I think, a question a lot of people have. Can good intentions be corrupted by power? Especially with how potent these laws that Greene lays out can seem.
Yeah, it's a valid concern, and I think that's where self-awareness really comes in. Think about it this way. Someone who's unethical might be able to use these tactics to get ahead for a while, but eventually they hit a wall.
Right.
Why? Because true power requires adaptability and self-control. Without those things, you just become predictable, rigid.
So it's not enough to just understand the laws. You have to master yourself, too.
Precisely knowing when to use those tactics, when to adapt them, and when to walk away altogether, that's where true mastery lies.
That actually reminds me of something I wanted to ask you. In a world that feels as chaotic and constantly changing as ours, how can anyone even begin to plan or strategize?
It's a great question, and Greene actually has this concept called forcing time. He uses examples like Caesar crossing the Rubicon and Obama's, unlikely presidential run to illustrate it.
Hold up, break that down for me. What does forcing time even mean?
It basically means taking action before you think you're ready instead of waiting for that perfect moment, which, let's be real, rarely exists. You make a bold move that forces you to figure things out as you go.
So it's about embracing a little risk, a little uncertainty.
Exactly, because that leap of faith often forces us to rise to the occasion, to discover resources and capabilities within ourselves that we didn't even know we had. It's about trusting yourself.
Yeah, it's like sometimes that first step, even if it's scary, it's all it takes to kind of get things moving,
Totally.
Like choosing to just dive into the shallow end of the pool instead of psyching yourself out on the high dive?
Oh, I like that analogy. And speaking of embracing challenges, Greene also talks about the transformative power of confronting our own mortality.
Right.
He even shares his own near-death experience, a stroke that he had,
Right.
and how it completely changed his relationship with time.
It's pretty incredible that he wears the same shirt he had on during his stroke as this constant reminder of the experience, like
Wow.
his own personal memento mori,
Yeah.
a really tangible symbol of life's fragility.
And that's exactly what he's getting at, making mortality this visceral emotional experience,
Right.
rather than just some abstract concept. He
Yeah,
even argues that our modern society tries to sanitize death, hide it away in hospitals and funeral homes.
it's true. We don't really talk about death much, do we?
Right.
It's like we've lost touch with this really fundamental part of being human.
Exactly. And Greene believes that this detachment from death can make us complacent, less appreciative of how precious life really
So
is.
how do we actually do that? How do we connect with our mortality in a way that's empowering rather than morbid?
Well, Greene suggests incorporating it into your daily life. He talks about meditating on death, visualizing that inevitable moment, and really sitting with those feelings,
Yeah.
not to be morbid,
Right.
but as a way to kind of ground himself in the present, to really appreciate each moment.
Yeah, it reminds me of that question. Like, if you knew you had a limited time left,
Right.
how would you live differently?
Such a powerful question.
Right.
And it's not about, becoming reckless or just chasing pleasure. It's about aligning your actions with what truly matters to you,
Ah,
pursuing those passions you've been putting off, cherishing the people you love.
really about squeezing every drop of meaning and joy out of this one precious life, right?
Absolutely. And here's the thing, that heightened awareness of our own mortality, it can actually make us more compassionate,
Oh, wow.
more understanding of other people's struggles. We're all in this together after, right?
Yeah.
Trying to navigate this finite existence as best we can.
Speaking of navigating, something we hear a lot about is the struggle of dealing with toxic people,
Oh, yeah.
toxic workplaces, toxic family dynamics,
Mm.
even toxic self-talk. It's like a modern epidemic.
It really is. And Greene doesn't sugarcoat that reality at all. He acknowledges that toxic people are unfortunately just part of life, but he also offers some really practical advice for dealing with them.
Okay.
And it all starts with early detection.
Because once you're stuck in that dynamic,
Okay.
it can be really hard to break free.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
Greene wants you to pay attention to those early warning signs,
Okay.
to trust your gut when something feels off about a person. Even if you can't quite put your finger on it,
Yeah.
don't ignore those red flags.
So even if someone seems really charming or charismatic at first, it's okay to slow down and really pay attention to how they're making you feel.
Absolutely, because remember, toxic people can be masters of disguise.
Oh, yeah?
They're often really good at presenting a really charming facade while harboring these deeper insecurities or manipulative tendencies.
Right. It's like that saying, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Exactly. Look beyond the surface. Pay attention to patterns of behavior.
Okay.
For example, does this person constantly blame others for their misfortunes?
Right.
That's often a big red flag.
Or if all of their past relationships ended badly and it's always the other person's fault.
Exactly. Those are the subtle clues that can save you a lot of heartache down the line.
So what if you're already in a situation with a toxic person,
Mm.
like a coworker you can't avoid, or even a family member?
Yeah, that's tough. Greene emphasizes the importance of emotional detachment in those situations.
Okay.
He talks about developing mental scripts to remind yourself that their behavior isn't actually about you.
So instead of taking their jabs personally, you could remind yourself, this is coming from their own issues, their own insecurities. It's not about me.
Exactly. You got it. And he even goes so far as to say that sometimes the healthiest choice is to just walk away. If it's a toxic job, quit. If it's a toxic relationship, create some distance. Protect your well-being. You deserve that.
It's really empowering to remember that we don't have to martyr ourselves,
Yeah.
to fix someone or endure a toxic situation.
Right.
Now, on the flip side of that, Greene also talks about how we often undermine our own power.
Yeah, he's talking about that tendency to cling to what worked for us in the past,
Right.
even when it's no longer serving us.
It's like we get so attached to those strategies and beliefs that help us survive in the past that we don't even realize they're holding us back now.
Totally. It's a trap that's so easy to fall into,
Right.
We find something that works, and naturally we want to hold on to it.
Right.
But Greene would say this is where adaptability comes in.
Right.
What got you here isn't necessarily going to get you where you want to go next.
Right.
Each new challenge, Each new phase of life, it requires us to evolve, develop new skills, new perspectives.
So how do we do that? How do we let go of those outdated strategies, even if they brought us comfort or success in the past?
It takes honesty and courage. First, you have to be able to identify those rafts that you're clinging to
Hmm.
and ask yourself, are these things truly helping me thrive, or are they just keeping me afloat?
Right. Are you holding on to a job that's no longer fulfilling,
Exactly.
staying in a relationship because it's familiar,
Right.
even if it's not serving you anymore?
It's a tough question to ask,
Yeah,
but it's a necessary one.
it really is.
Yeah.
And, it reminds me of Greene's latest project, his new book, The Law of the Sublime. He's been pretty secretive about the details.
Yeah,
But from what I've gathered, it feels like a culmination of his life's work,
I think so.
you know, exploring those experiences that shake up our ordinary ways of seeing the world.
It's like he's trying to help us see beyond the matrix,
Right.
to break free from those limited ways of thinking that keep us trapped.
Totally. And he even hints at this idea of embracing weirdness,
Hmm.
which, knowing Greene, I'm sure it's not about like, quirky fashion choices or anything like that.
No, he's not talking about wearing mismatched socks.
Okay, good.
It's about challenging those conventions, questioning assumptions and really embracing what makes you truly unique.
Hmm.
He seems to be saying that society needs more individuals who are willing to color outside the lines,
Yeah.
to pursue their passions authentically, even if it means standing out from the crowd.
I love that it's like he's giving us permission to let our freak flags fly,
Yeah.
but in a way that's both authentic and purposeful.
Exactly. And it circles back to that idea of self-mastery we talked about earlier, recognizing that true power comes from being true to yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable or unconventional.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Robert Greene, what's the one thing you want our listener to walk away with today?
I think Greene leaves us with this really powerful challenge. Embrace your delightful weirdness.
Hmm.
Ask yourself what makes me unique. What are those passions, those perspectives that I've been holding back? And how can I express them more fully in my work, my relationships, my life? Because it's often in those moments of authentic self-expression that we discover our greatest power and our greatest potential for impact.
Letting that inner spark become a roaring flame,
Yes.
not letting self-doubt or societal expectations dim our shine. This has been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for diving in with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Be sure to check back with us next time for another insightful conversation.